I'm Livia, and my family owns the Van Gogh house. It's a 200-year-old building in South London where Vincent van Gogh lived for 1 year in 1873. And what we do now is that we run it as a centre for contemporary art. So we have lots of artists living here, making new work for it, as well as putting on exhibitions here as well. So as well as being a really historic space that talks about this amazing artist Van Gogh, we also really want to support and allow new art to be made and seen by lots of different people. So hopefully, something quite unique. Yeah, so it's a really interesting story. My father, James Wong, he was reading the newspaper one day in bed, and one day he was like, oh my God, Van Gogh's house is up for sale. And there's a really great line he said, which was, I can never buy a Van Gogh painting, I can never afford it, but I can afford his house. So he went to auction and bought it without even seeing it, and I don't think he quite realised how terrible a state the building was in. And at that time, I was an architecture student. And a few years later, I'd graduated, I worked in lots of different architecture practices, and I felt like I could take on the project. So me and a few friends of mine, we spent a long time drawing the house, just really trying to understand what it was already like, which I think is really important with old buildings. And after about 5 years, we made a planning application. It wasn't very smooth, we had to try a few times. Eventually, we came up with a kind of maybe a sensitive approach to working with the old buildings, something that both tells the story of Van Gogh, but also the whole story of the building. So, the people who lived here before Van Gogh did, as well as the people who lived here. But what was really important to us was not only the design of the building and how we would work with, the old part of the building and designing somewhere new, but was also just working with really, really good builders. So people who knew everything about all the different types of materials you need to use, people who could very, very carefully, look under the floorboards and, point out anything interesting to us. So this building process was really slow and really, really careful. And throughout that, it meant we found loads of really special objects. We found lots of toys and, things from 150 years ago. And so the whole process of building added to the story of the house and is a really big sort of important part of what we talk about when we show people around the building. So Van Gogh wrote lots of letters here, and what I really liked thinking about was that this was his first time away from home, and you can really tell this in his letters. So he was 20, he was working for his uncle at his uncle's art gallery in Covent Garden, and his parents were really nervous. So they were really nervous to send their son away from home for the first time. And in their letters they say, every day I know you have sausages and bacon for breakfast, but I don't know who cooks it for you, I'm really worried. They're very worried that London is such a big city and that, he's always sort of grown up in small towns and villages, so they don't know how he's going to react. So you get this sense of this young man who doesn't really know who he is yet, compared to the Van Gogh that we all know, which is the sunflowers and potato eaters and these really big famous paintings. Actually, in this house, we can tell this story of, how an artist actually comes to be. So Van Gogh in London, he also wrote a lot about the art that he saw and the books that he read. So even though he wasn't really drawing, he was actually forming his ideas of what it is to be an artist. And I find that really exciting. I think about my first time away from home and the first time I actually had to make my own ideas as an adult and be like, no, this is my politics, or this is, the art and the literature that I like. And those are the decisions that he's making when he's here. So when we first started the house, we really wanted people to still be able to live in it. So not really like a normal museum where there's a separation between the person making the art and when the art is actually on the walls. So we first started by running a few residencies. We had artists from Sichuan actually come and stay here, which was really nice. And for one of them, it was their first time out of China as well. So it was really nice to be able to provide that opportunity and to live in, the house that Van Gogh lived in. Beyond providing opportunities like that. We've had a few small exhibitions as well, where people hang inside the house, and it's quite interesting for people to, you know, not be showing in a gallery space, but showing the space where we can eat and, you know, discuss art over dinner or over tea, and have people in your living room to look at the art as well. I think it's a really interesting way of being with art, with sculpture, with painting, with photographs. So we opened in 2019, and we had about sort of 7 months before the pandemic happened. And that was really, really difficult for us because we were just getting going and trying to sort out our organisation. But we actually realised that so many people would come to the outside of the house and take a photo of the blue plaque, because we have this plaque that says Vincent van Gogh, painter, lived here. So many people were coming to see, and during the lockdowns that we had in London, everyone was doing these walks, and so I was talking to lots of people who were coming by. And so then we had this idea to put art in the window, because every time you put it in the window, anyone can see. There's no opening times, there's no closing times, and every time they take a photo of the blue plaque, they also see the window as well. So that was is an ongoing, really fun project where we've been able to talk to lots of different artists that we really admire, and writers, and people all from, you know, different aspects of literature and fine art and painting, and that's something that I've really enjoyed. This idea actually came out of the fact that when Van Gogh was here, he really loved to read poetry, and he copies out a poem in a letter to his mum by John Keats, where they talk about the view from the window. And so we thought, oh, we'll take that line on the western window pane and call our poster project. So the idea also came from this other artist called Jeremy Deller. So he made this poster that said, "Thank God for immigrants," and it was writing, and he put it in the window, and so many people were writing to us. So people, you know, not only just taking photos, they were writing letters to us saying, "Oh, thank you so much for putting this in your window. Van Gogh was also an immigrant. This is really important." And so we realised actually having writing and having a statement next to the blue plaque meant it felt like it was something that Van Gogh was saying. We thought that was really, really exciting. And so we started drawing up this list of artists and writers and people that we wanted to work with. And I think people were really excited about the project because it's something that's quite quick, something that, you know, doesn't involve long contracts and things that, you know, as an artist you have to deal with, or as a curator you have to deal with. It was something that felt like it was quite natural and fast moving and really fun as well. Like, you know, giving someone a brief saying, look at this poem, think about the idea of the house, think about what message you might want to give from the window. And then everyone took a really, really different approach to it. So one artist, Madeline Pledge, she really wanted to give out a message that was really useful. So she wanted artists to join a union, because she joined a union. So that's what her poster said. Whereas Leslie Sharp, who's a printmaker and makes really, really beautiful, delicate prints, she actually looked at Van Gogh's letters where he writes about all the cherry blossom and pears and beautiful plants that he sees when he's walking around this neighbourhood. So she actually made an image that reflected all of the plants he was talking about. So these are two very different approaches. Whereas Jordan Baseman, who did our poster in August, his was a big smiley face that was very, very simple, but actually all the colours of that came from the sunflowers in Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is one of the 5 sets of the sunflowers that Van Gogh painted in his life. And upcoming, we have Yefuna, which I'm really, really excited about. And she actually talks a bit more about, I guess, Van Gogh's mental state and how people perceive it as well. This link between how people think of, I guess, mental health and genius and artists and, I guess, that heroism all tied together. And I think that's really interesting. Now, our ongoing exhibition is also a series of photographs by sculptors Frank Kent and Brian Griffiths, and that's just been hung. And you can probably see behind me that there's this really beautiful photograph of a chair within a frame. And that was so exciting for us because it was the first time that we commissioned artwork to be in the house as well, instead of, you know, work that was already made that then we were exhibiting. So now it's got this feeling of something that's really, really bespoke and specific to the building as well. And I hope when people come around and see the exhibitions and see the different posters that we've been doing, that they can all start drawing their own stories and thinking about, how does this relate to Van Gogh? You know, what are the different people and the different, I guess, stories that are all related to this building? Because I think there are so many. But we really want to do more residencies with artists from China and in China. So we also run a residency space in Chengdu called AVG Space. And we have artists from across China doing residencies there at the moment because we can't have any international travel at the moment, which is really, really sad. But also we've worked with some really amazing artists in the past, like Xu Zongming as well, and Cai Yuan. So all of these artists who have these kind of are from China but actually have really strong ties with the UK as well. And it's definitely something that we want to do more of. I think we have such strong ties with China as a family. I've worked there as well. My sister is a painter who also has exhibitions in Beijing. And I think there's something about, I guess, the way artists work in China at the moment and the different artist communities, which I think is really, really exciting and something that not that many people in London or in the UK actually know about. What I really miss over the past 2 years of not going to Chengdu is visiting all of the artists' houses and studios and things that are just made on a completely different scale. Whereas, you know, in London, rent is so expensive and spaces are so much smaller, and it's so many things that are possible in China aren't really possible here. My father, so he trained to be a violinist in Sichuan 音乐学院, and he always talked about the two artists that he learned about when he was studying were Beethoven and Vincent van Gogh. And so much about their lives of struggle and having to work really, really hard and not really being recognised for their genius at the time. So these two figures were really important to him. My dad has always sort of seen himself as an artist, and if you've met him, he's a very sort of outgoing and eccentric person. He gets really excited and emotional about things. And so I think the project it kind of really reflects that. I think when people come round, they're sort of quite surprised that it's come out in this particular way, because it's something that is so unique and I guess reflects kind of a lot of his emotional responses.